The night the clip leaked, the world felt smaller and louder at the same time. In under 10 seconds, a private courtroom eruption, Tamar's chaos with Mendeecees, became the wedge that cracked a marriage already under pressure. The visuals were raw, a tremor of voices, a pointed exchange, faces caught between fury and disbelief. Viewers watched as history folded into gossip, and the line between public performance and private pain vanished. Yandy Smith had built a life of careful image and fierce loyalty. Her marriage, once framed as partnership and patience, suddenly faced a new test, one played out on screens, in DMs, and on talk shows. This was not a scandal that arrived gently. It detonated, scattering assumptions and demanding answers. What looked like a personal fallout quickly became a headline about allegiance and survival in the spotlight. There is a sound to this kind of collapse. The click of keyboards, the hush in rooms that once felt safe, the slow realization that secrets have a way of walking into the open. Friends texted. Producers called. Clips looped. The narrative that followed made everything smaller and more savage. Reduction to a few frames, a few words. But behind those moments stood years of private choices, compromises, and unspoken strains. We do not open this story to shame. We open it to understand the moment when a public incident pushes a private relationship past its brink. In the wake of Tamar's courtroom chaos, Yandy did the unthinkable. She chose to end a marriage. That decision did not happen in a vacuum. It was the sum of small ruptures amplified by an unforgiving audience. To grasp the pathway from that single viral clip to a life-altering choice, we must trace the backstory, the alliances, the tensions, the history that led to the trigger, and the private moments nobody knew would define public destiny and demand answers. Before chaos erupted in that courtroom, Yandy Smith and Mendeecees Harris stood as one of love and hip-hop's most enduring power couples. Their bond had survived separation, legal battles, and public scrutiny. Fans had watched their wedding special, followed their parenting journey, and even witnessed Yandy's decision to stand by her husband through his incarceration, a choice that earned her both admiration and criticism. Yet beneath that image of resilience, there were fractures no one could see. Industry insiders had long whispered about emotional distance, career tension, and conflicting priorities. Mendeecees wanted peace while Yandy craved purpose, activism, business, expansion. She built brands, mentored artists, and spoke out for justice. But every time she rose higher, Mendeecees felt the shadow of being sidelined. What started as admiration for her drive quietly turned into discomfort. Then came the re-emergence of Tamar Braxton, unpredictable, magnetic, and unfiltered. Tamar had entered the orbit through charity events and overlapping management circles. She brought her own storm, and soon, that energy collided with Yandy's disciplined calm. Rumors hinted that behind the smiles and selfies, there were disagreements, professional and personal, that left everyone uneasy. Sources close to production described a tension you could taste. Something was building. Conversations grew shorter, silences heavier. The show's cameras caught glimpses of what seemed like subtle unease, but nothing compared to what was happening behind the scenes. Quiet counseling sessions, family interventions, and off-record confessions that no one was meant to hear. Through it all, Yandy remained composed. She had spent years mastering public poise, but those close to her began noticing the fatigue, the way her eyes lingered when Mendeecees spoke, the pauses before she answered. She had fought too many wars for love to surrender easily. But even warriors tire when the battlefield becomes home. And then, in the middle of that fragile calm, Tamar's court case arrived, dragging old secrets and new conflicts into the spotlight. It wasn't just a public event. It was the match that would ignite everything that had been quietly waiting to burn. The trigger was coming next, and it would leave no one untouched. It started with a summons and ended in chaos. Tamar Braxton's legal dispute, already volatile, took an unexpected turn when Mendeecees' name appeared in connection to testimony logistics. What was meant to be a procedural appearance spiraled into confrontation when Tamar accused Yandy's husband of meddling in her affairs. Cameras weren't supposed to be rolling, but someone's phone was. The leaked footage was grainy but explosive. In it, Tamar could be heard shouting, her voice trembling between anger and heartbreak. Mendeecees stood silent for a moment before muttering something that only made the tension worse. "Don't play victim, Tamar," he said, words that spread like wildfire online. Tamar shot back, "You don't even respect your own wife, but you're here in my business?" The courtroom atmosphere cracked open. Gasps, movement, chaos. Bailiffs stepped in. By the next morning, the clip was everywhere. Blogs ran headlines like "Tamar and Mendeecees clash in courtroom meltdown." Screenshots filled timelines. Fans slowed the video, lip-read reactions, and analyzed every eye roll. Yandy, who wasn't even present that day, woke up to thousands of mentions dragging her name into something she hadn't touched. Inside her home, that morning felt eerily familiar. The kind of silence that comes before a storm you can't control. Her phone buzzed endlessly. Friends called to check in, but every message carried the same undertone. "Are you okay? What's really going on?" Mendeecees tried to explain it was nothing, a misunderstanding. But the tone, the optics, the insinuations, they told a different story. Yandy had fought too hard for her family's peace to let another public spectacle undo it. The footage wasn't just embarrassing, it was symbolic, a crack in the foundation of trust. Behind closed doors, voices were raised, tears shed. For the first time, Yandy didn't defend him. She sat quiet, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. The man she once covered in loyalty now stood as a reminder of every battle she'd fought alone. And while the world debated who was right, Yandy began asking herself a different question. Was it worth it anymore? That question hung in the air, unanswered, heavy, as the internet erupted in full force. What happened next was pure digital chaos. Within hours, the clip had crossed platforms, from gossip pages to major entertainment outlets. The headline storm was relentless. Yandy's marriage in question after Tamar's courtroom explosion. Fans dissected every micro-expression, every pause, and every glance exchanged in that viral footage. What had begun as courtroom drama was now a nationwide conversation about loyalty, respect, and the thin line between defending your partner and losing yourself. Twitter became a battlefield. Team Tamar flooded timelines with claims that Mendeecees had overstepped, while others defended him, arguing he was just caught in someone else's breakdown. Instagram Reels looped the moment Tamar's voice cracked. TikTok creators posted split-screen reactions, one side showing the footage, the other showing Yandy's old interviews about loyalty and trust. Each comment section turned into a therapy session mixed with accusations. Then came the memes. Screenshots of Mendeecees' blank stare paired with captions like, "When your drama becomes trending news," filled feeds. But behind the humor was tension. Fans noticed that Yandy hadn't posted anything. No statement, no story. Just silence. That silence became its own headline. Yandy breaks social media silence. By staying silent. Friends close to her described the atmosphere as numb. She avoided the press, canceled appearances, and stopped responding to texts from co-stars who wanted exclusive reactions. For the first time, the woman who had always been in control of her narrative had none. Meanwhile, Tamar capitalized on the moment, posting cryptic captions about fake loyalty and women protecting other women. Each post pulled Yandy deeper into the storm she never chose. When a private message from Mendeecees leaked, allegedly asking Tamar to clear things up before it gets worse, the internet lost its mind. Fans debated whether the message proved guilt or desperation. Either way, it fueled the fire. And just when the world thought the story couldn't escalate further, it did. Screenshots, audios, and receipts began surfacing. Not from tabloids this time, but from insiders who claimed to know what really happened behind the curtain. What dropped next didn't just expose a fight, it rewrote the entire narrative. It began with a whisper and ended in a digital explosion. Just as the frenzy started to fade, a well-known entertainment blogger posted a single screenshot on X, formerly Twitter. a blurred message thread between Mendeecees and a TB contact. Within minutes, the full conversation leaked, and it changed everything. In the messages, Mendeecees appeared to comfort Tamar days before the court incident. "You don't deserve all this," one message read. "You just need someone who actually listens." That sentence alone detonated online. Fans scrolled, zoomed, analyzed timestamps. To many, it sounded like empathy. To others, emotional betrayal. Then came the audio clip. A 2-minute voice note surfaced from what insiders claimed was a private rehearsal meeting days before court. Tamar's voice could be heard saying, "You told me Yandy wouldn't mind if we talked. But she minds now, doesn't she?" Her tone wasn't angry, it was knowing. That small piece of audio shifted the entire narrative. YouTube channels, podcasts, and gossip accounts tore into the story, each claiming exclusive insight. Some called it manipulation. Others said it was connection taken out of context. But what made it impossible to ignore was Yandy's reaction, or lack thereof. She remained completely silent. No denial, no statement. Just a quiet unfollow spree that fans noticed instantly. Mendeecees, Tamar, even a few castmates, all gone from her following list. By the end of the week, a full thread of alleged text messages between Mendeecees and a show producer surfaced, revealing his frustration that Yandy's brand always comes first. In another, he allegedly wrote, "I'm tired of being the background of her empire." That one line turned sympathy away from him. Viewers who once admired his calm now saw resentment. Every receipt came like a pulse. One more piece of a puzzle Yandy never wanted solved in public. The receipts didn't just suggest miscommunication. They painted a picture of emotional distance, of conversations that crossed invisible lines, and as those pieces fell together, one truth became clear. Yandy wasn't walking away from one bad moment. She was escaping a buildup of quiet betrayals disguised as misunderstandings. But when sympathy began shifting, so did the power. What happened next flipped the balance in ways no one expected. When the receipts hit full visibility, the internet's sympathy transformed overnight. What started as jokes and memes became reflection and outrage. Suddenly, the narrative wasn't about Tamar's outburst or even Mendeecees' texts. It was about Yandy's silence, her composure, her restraint in the face of public humiliation. Comment sections began to change tone. The hashtags evolved from like Free Mendeecees to Might Protect Yandy. Fans flooded her old posts with messages like, "You deserved better," and "Your peace is your power." It was as if the public collectively realized that the woman they'd watched hold a family, together for years, had reached her breaking point. Even her critics, who once accused her of being controlling or performative, began acknowledging the emotional weight she carried. They saw the years of loyalty, the prison visits, the advocacy, the brand building, and how it had all been met with quiet resentment. Suddenly, the power wasn't in Mendeecees' voice or Tamar's chaos. It was in Yandy's choice not to play the game anymore. Meanwhile, Mendeecees tried to reclaim control. He went live on Instagram, denying rumors and insisting that everything was being twisted. But the tone was defensive, not confident. Every word felt like damage control. The chat flooded with comments like, "Why explain what you didn't do?" and "Your actions said enough." Tamar, sensing the tide turning, deleted her cryptic posts. The silence that followed felt like surrender. Through it all, Yandy stayed quiet, but her actions spoke louder. She appeared at a charity event alone, wearing all white, no ring, no explanation. That image trended across entertainment media for days. It wasn't just fashion, it was symbolism, rebirth, detachment, a woman reclaiming control of her own story. The balance had shifted. The internet that once mocked her was now her armor. Public empathy had found its focus. But in the entertainment world, power never sits idle for long. And soon, industry players began to step in, trying to rewrite the damage before it sank any deeper. The cleanup had begun. And it was all about optics. The moment Yandy stepped out in silence, the industry went into crisis mode. Publicists, network reps, and brand managers scrambled behind the scenes. Love and hip-hop producers held emergency meetings, trying to assess whether to spin the story or stay out of it entirely. VH1 executives reportedly reached out to both Yandy and Mendeecees, urging them to keep communication respectful while the network evaluated the next phase of narrative control. That phrase alone, narrative control, said everything. This wasn't just a marriage falling apart. It was a brand imploding in real time. Mendeecees' PR team moved quickly, releasing a short statement claiming he had nothing but respect for Tamar and that family matters remain private. But fans weren't buying it. Every public word felt like performance, too polished, too late. Meanwhile, Yandy's circle stayed tight. Her team quietly canceled scheduled press events, pulled pending collaborations, and began crafting a different image. Yandy, the survivor. Brands she'd worked with for years began to pivot messaging. Less power couple, more resilient woman. The shift was deliberate. Entertainment blogs noticed it instantly. One outlet wrote, "Yandy is doing what the industry rarely allows, controlling her narrative by saying nothing." And that silence became her greatest PR weapon. Behind closed doors, producers debated whether to feature the story arc next season. Some argued it was ratings gold. Others said it was too real, too raw. Tamar's team, already reeling from backlash, released a brief denial of inappropriate communication, framing everything as media exaggeration. But the audience had already chosen its truth. In less than a week, Mendeecees' sponsorship deals began to falter. 2 clothing brands quietly removed him from their promotional material. Industry insiders whispered that the Yandy effect, her quiet strength, had made him radioactive to endorsement managers. The game had changed. The press couldn't bury the story. They could only redirect it. And as Hollywood's machinery tried to manage perception, something deeper was brewing beneath Yandy's calm surface, the emotion behind the composure. When the cameras turned away and the noise dulled, Yandy finally allowed herself to feel it. The exhaustion, the grief, the quiet ache of betrayal. For years, she'd been the anchor, the strategist, the woman who held everyone else steady. But this time there was no plan, no playbook, just pain. Friends described her as distant but not broken. She'd mastered silence, but silence doesn't erase hurt. Inside, she replayed every promise, every time she'd chosen patience over pride. The thought that her loyalty had been mistaken for weakness stung more than the betrayal itself. There were nights she sat awake scrolling through old photos, wondering when the distance began. Was it during the long prison years? Or the moment she started rising faster than he did? Fame has a way of distorting love, turning teamwork into quiet competition. And when ego mixes with insecurity, even the strongest bond begins to erode. Mendeecees wasn't the villain in her mind, not entirely. She still saw the man who once held her through storms, but she also saw the one who couldn't handle her light when it grew brighter than his. That realization hurt the most. Behind that calm exterior, a war raged between forgiveness and finality. She could fix things, she always had. But this time she didn't want to. She wanted peace, not performance. For Yandy, walking away wasn't revenge, it was self-preservation. And as she told one close friend, "I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done pretending I'm okay." Those words marked the quiet turning point of her story, not shouted, not filmed, but lived in silence. And just when it seemed like the dust might finally settle, one revelation surfaced that would blow everything open again. A truth that changed what everyone thought they knew. The breaking point didn't arrive in a press release or another viral video. It came from someone no one expected. A former production assistant from Love and Hip Hop stepped forward with a folder of archived communications between the show's producers, Tamar's management, and Mendeecees himself. What they revealed shattered every public assumption. The leaked documents showed that weeks before Tamar's courtroom chaos, producers had been orchestrating cross-drama scenes, moments meant to intertwine Tamar's legal struggles with Yandy and Mendeecees' marital storyline. The plan? boost viewership with real emotional tension. What no one predicted was how real it would become. One email, dated just days before the court hearing, instructed staff to position Mendeecees as emotional support, a calming energy to Tamar's instability. Another note warned, keep Yandy unaware for authentic reaction. That line alone sent shockwaves through the fandom. The chaos everyone thought was spontaneous had been manipulated. But the emotions, the pain, the fallout, the betrayal, were all too real. When Yandy learned about those emails, something in her changed. It wasn't just Mendeecees' part that broke her trust. It was the realization that the world around her, the machine she had helped build, had used her heartbreak for content. She had spent years defending the authenticity of her love story, insisting her life wasn't scripted. Now, she faced proof that even her pain had been packaged for ratings. The weight of that truth was unbearable. Friends say she didn't cry when she saw the files. She just closed her laptop and said, "Now I understand everything." The revelation flipped the narrative entirely. Mendeecees wasn't just a man caught in rumors. He had willingly participated in a setup that compromised his own marriage. Whether it was for fame, pressure, or ego, no one knew. But for Yandy, that was the final betrayal. Not of love, but of trust. When the story broke publicly, fans were stunned into silence. The show that built them had ultimately broken them. And as the industry scrambled once again to contain the fallout, the conversation began to shift. Not about scandal, but about culture, exploitation, and the price of authenticity in reality TV. Once the truth surfaced, the internet's outrage evolved into something deeper, reflection. What started as entertainment had become a case study in emotional exploitation. Commentators, podcasts, and think pieces poured in, dissecting how reality television had blurred the line between story and suffering. Viewers who had once laughed at on-screen drama now felt complicit. They began to question how much of what they'd watched over the years had been genuine, and how much had been engineered for shock value. Yandy's silence became a symbol, not of weakness, but of quiet rebellion against a machine that thrives on pain for profit. Cultural critics pointed out the irony. A woman who had spent years helping build a franchise now stood as its cautionary tale. She had represented strength, family, and loyalty, and the system had commodified every part of it. Online discussions turned introspective, focusing less on the scandal and more on what it revealed about the audience itself. Mendeecees, meanwhile, faded into the background. Tamar avoided interviews, but Yandy's name continued trending, not for drama, but for the conversation she unintentionally ignited. Hashtags like Respect Yandy and Reality has limits began circulating, used by fans and industry veterans alike. Even inside VH1's walls, whispers began about reform, tighter ethics guidelines, mental health clauses, emotional protection policies. Whether those changes would last remained uncertain, but the shift was undeniable. The spectacle had forced an entire culture to confront its appetite for destruction. Through it all, Yandy stayed consistent, showing grace without offering closure. She didn't confirm a divorce. She didn't clap back. She simply kept moving forward, reminding everyone that silence can be the loudest statement of all. But as her world recalibrated and fans debated lessons learned, there was still one final act, a moment of reckoning where emotion met resolution, and the story found its haunting conclusion. When the dust finally began to settle, Yandy sat for one final interview. Not for the show, not for clicks, but for herself. The setting was quiet, a dimly lit studio, soft background music, no glitz, no interruptions. Her tone was calm, almost detached. "Sometimes peace costs more than love," she said, eyes steady but heavy. She didn't name names, didn't place blame. Instead, she spoke of lessons, about visibility, privacy, and the danger of living for applause. She admitted that fame had given her everything except balance, and that she'd mistaken endurance for happiness. Her words hit differently because they weren't rehearsed. They were release. Mendeecees by then had moved out quietly. There was no explosive confrontation, no final scene, just distance. Sources said they agreed to co-parent with mutual respect, but emotionally, their chapters had closed. Tamar issued one last post. Some truths don't need explaining. And with that, the story everyone had followed for weeks finally started to fade from the feeds. But for Yandy, the ending wasn't about loss, it was about liberation. She returned to her advocacy work, recentered her focus, and began living with intention again. For once, there were no cameras documenting her healing, no producers waiting for reactions. Just a woman reclaiming her narrative in peace. Her last line in that interview lingered long after the cameras stopped rolling. "I used to think strength meant staying. Now I know, sometimes strength means walking away." That quote went viral for all the right reasons, not as gossip, but as truth, and as the world absorbed her quiet strength. One question remained, not about drama, but about growth, resilience, and how fame tests the boundaries of love itself. In the end, this wasn't just another love and hip-hop storyline, it was a mirror, a reminder that behind every viral clip, every trending hashtag, are real people wrestling with choices the public will never fully understand. Yandy Smith didn't lose herself in scandal. She found herself through it. The courtroom chaos, the receipts, the betrayal, they weren't just drama, they were catalysts for transformation. She walked through the storm the industry created and came out with clarity that can't be edited or scripted. Her silence spoke louder than any statement, her peace louder than any PR move. And maybe that's the real message here. Healing doesn't need an audience. In a culture addicted to exposure, Yandy chose dignity. And in doing so, she reminded millions that walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. So now, as the dust settles and fans look back, one question remains for all of us watching from behind the screen. Whose side are you really on? The spectacle or the truth?